Hello all, I wanted to do a multi-tool wire cutter face-off here. So I've got miscellaneous types of wire up here, and I've got some miscellaneous multi-tools down here. Got the Victorinox precision pliers on the skipper, Leatherman juice, that happens to be an S2, SOG pocket power plier, SOG PowerLock, Leatherman wave, Victorinox Spirit X, Gerber Mp 600, and Gerber Mp 400. And then the wire we've got is some 10 gauge stranded, 20 gauge solid, 16 gauge stranded. Here's some real fine strands, 12 gauge like you'd see on a battery cable, and then about some 20 gauge stranded. So I'll just go from left to right and start cutting away. Okay, Gerber Mp 400 with the 20 gauge stranded. Great. Okay, let's try the 12 gauge battery cable. Left a couple of strands there, but mostly did a good job. Let's see, maybe I had it towards the pivot a little too much. This is really, the jacketing is a little too thick for this. Yep. So that leaves a couple of strands on a big 12 gauge. 16 gauge stranded. Great job. 20 gauge solid. I'm expecting this to go well. Yeah, it's not a big challenge. Let's try the thicker strands of the 10 gauge. Really good. Nice job, Gerber. Okay, Gerber Mp 600. Not expecting great things from this one. So, 16 gauge stranded. It's kind of pinchy. Kind of just barely made it through. 20 gauge stranded. Left a couple of, left most of the strands, only cut the jacketing. Fail. 12 gauge battery cable. Come on. Left a bunch of strands. That's terrible. 20 gauge solid. No problem. 10 gauge, a little heavier strands. You can see the cutters are big enough, but just barely made it. A lot of effort too. Let's try that again. Didn't make it that time. Kind of half pinched, half sheared. Left a few strands. So that's not a very good wire cutter on the Mp 600 with the carbide inserts. This is a brand new bladeless one. Alright, Victorinox Spirit on the 16 gauge stranded. No problem, no drama. 12 gauge battery cable. Let's try. Kind of got stuck closed a little bit. It was pretty terrible. Looks like the fine strands got cut in the hard wire cutting openings. I was not expecting that. 20 gauge solid. No problem, very smooth. Oh, look, here's a twist tie. Let's try that. No problem. 10 gauge. Not expecting great things from this because it's a pretty small wire cutter on the Spirit. Get it in there as far as I can. Kind of jammed closed. Yeah. Actually, that's as bad as the Gerber on the bigger stuff. Okay. Get my wires mixed up a little bit here. Leatherman wave. 12 gauge battery cable. Oh geez, that's suboptimal. Can't get it open. Jammed up. And this is what I don't really like about butterfly plier designs. I gotta use another MT to open this one. You can see it kind of skewed the tips too. It's like it got stuck in between there. Oh my god. Alright. Oh, there goes the spring on that. Alright, that was a total failure. Cut maybe 50% of the strands. So real fine gauge or heavy gauge fine stranded is not good for the wave. Okay, let's try the 16 stranded. No problem. 20 stranded. No problem. 20 solid. No. Oh. What the heck happened there? Did it slip out the end maybe? Yeah. No problem. 10 stranded. I'm expecting this to jam it up again, but let's see. No, it didn't jam it up, just the real fine stuff. But it also didn't cut through all the strands. Left about 4 strands left. You could get through it, I think. Just takes a couple of cuts. So the real fine gauge stranded wire is not good for the wave. Probably for most of the Leatherman. Alright, SOG PowerLock. I'm expecting great things from this one. This one's got the compound leverage and a big area for wire cutter here. So 18 stranded. Clean cut, effortless. Guess you would expect that. Let's try this tricky battery cable again. Wow, clean cut, no problem. 20 gauge stranded. Clean cut, no problem. 20 gauge solid. This is the best one of the bunch so far for the wire cutters. SOG PowerLock. Oh, 10 gauge stranded. Wow, really easy and a clean cut. No strands left. Okay, SOG Pocket PowerPlier. 20 gauge stranded. Easy, clean cut. 16 gauge stranded. A little more pinchy of a cut than the PowerLock, but nothing to complain about. 12 gauge real fine. Let's try the fine strands. Yeah, left one little strand there at the bottom. Maybe I got it in the pivot a little. Yeah, clean cut, a little more pinching than the PowerLock, but very good overall. 20 gauge solid. No one seems to have a problem with this, even the MP600. 10 gauge stranded. Clean, of course. Clean cut, no problem. A little more pinchy than the PowerLock though. And, okay, Leatherman juice. This might be a mixed bag, but let's give it a go. 16 gauge stranded. Uh-oh. Not good. Only cut about half the strands. Let's try it in the little notch in the bottom. Oh, that's better. Good. Okay, 12 gauge battery cable. I think this is going to jam it up, isn't it? Yeah, jammed up tight. Eek. Cut about half the strands. Fail. So far the PowerLock's the only one to handle that with any grace, isn't it? 20 gauge solid. No problem. 20 gauge stranded. No problem. 10 gauge stranded for this little guy. How's that gonna do? Really get it down there. Wow, it actually did it. Jammed shut just a little bit, but I didn't open the butterfly. I didn't need to come to the rescue with another tool. So good. So this seems like this is good for, I don't know, maybe 14 gauge and below, maybe 12 gauge if it's thicker strands. All right, now the Victorinox. What are you guys expecting for this? I'm not expecting much. That is a pretty small wire cutter notch there. 10 gauge. If I had to cut this, I would have to cut the insulation off first and then cut it strand by strand. Let's see if it's capable of cutting strand by strand. Yep, no problem. So you could eventually do it, but not the right tool for the job. Here's a twist tie. Let's see if it can cut that. Squish it down a little bit first so it'll fit in the wire cutter notch. No, can't even cut a twist tie. 16 gauge stranded. Too big. 20 gauge stranded. You could do it, but it's going to take some chewing. 20 gauge solid. Oh, the insulation is too thick. Looks like you could do it if you stripped it first. Let's give that a shot. It might have been too close to the end. There we go. Okay. 20 gauge solid, just the conductor. Yep, no problem. Clean cut too. So consider this a very fine wire cutters. It's sharp, tight tolerance, but doesn't have, won't accept a big diameter. Looks like it might take 18 gauge solid, but just the conductor. Okay, so there you have it, guys. Absolute winner is the SOG PowerLock. Honorable mentions are the Gerber Mp 400. Did pretty well on everything. 10 gauge was pushing it. And the SOG Pocket PowerPlier also did everything pretty well. And it didn't even need the hard wire cutting notch. Leatherman jammed up when you cut fine strands, but did pretty well on everything else. Spirit did okay, but the wire cutter is pretty small on the Spirit, so anything bigger than maybe like a coarsely stranded 12 or 14 gauge is not going to work. Of course, in Europe they don't need such big gauge wire since they have the higher voltage. There you have it, guys. Hope that was helpful. That wire cutters is something that I always wonder about when I'm looking at multi-tools. People don't test them a lot. They don't comment on them a lot, really. So now we have something. See you next time.